You're listening to From the Horse's Mouth, intrepid conversations with Phil Fersht.
Hello, welcome to the latest edition of From the Horse's Mouth web podcast. I'm your host, Phil Fersht. And joining me today is somebody I think I've known for about nearly 10 years now. And when I first met him, he came to one of our HFS summits in London and spoke all about AI. This was when I think everyone was obsessing with automation and process. But Azeem's been a regular voice on AI for a very long time. He's the founder of Exponential View, which is one of the world's most influential platforms for understanding the impact of tech on business and society. So if you get a chance, sign up for Exponential View. It's one of my favorite emails when I get it through on a weekly basis. I'll get Azeem to talk more about himself, but, he is everywhere. He's got a very interesting show on Bloomberg TV. He's a frequent speaker and attender at the World Economic Forum, amongst other things. And he's also a fellow at Stanford, Oxford Martin School, and Harvard Business School. And in 2022, he published his debut book, Exponential: Order and Chaos in the Age of Accelerating Technology. So great to have you, Azeem. Have I missed anything?
Well, it's great to be back, Phil. Well, you did miss out the detail of the very, very posh and seductive hotel that you held that HFS event in back about 10 years ago, which, as you say, was all about RPA, if that's still a thing. It's been a really, really busy 10 years. I actually love the fact that I've been able to get back to writing code, which is not something I had done since 2010, spend a lot of time doing that. And a lot of the tools I use day to day now are things that I have designed myself and had built by Claude Code or something similar.
Wow. So you're one of these coders whose life's been transformed by frontier models?
Well, I'm not so sure I was a coder, because I remember my head of engineering telling me back in 2010, please stop doing this, by which he meant write code. And so I did in fact stop. But, actually, what ends up happening is that, one knows about software and about products because you've been in the industry for a while and you know about your own needs. So now that you can articulate that and essentially get the code hammered out that you need, and you can make sure that all those things that you would never have done yourself as a two-finger coder, refactor it or have good test coverage, that all gets taken care of, and it's been pretty remarkable. And in fact, in the last 8 or 9 weeks, my interface to writing the things I need has become Discord. Because I just fired off to my OpenClaw agent, and my OpenClaw agent has access to Claude Code, it has access to OpenAI's Codex, and it goes off and builds whatever I need. Interestingly, every night it will go off and walk all of my repos on GitHub, and it will fix certain bugs that it finds, and it will refactor monoblocks of code. It'll check them for security problems. It'll update libraries if there's been an advisory to do so. And it does all of that in the background. It kind of works. It kind of works.
Yeah. We'll get onto it later, but why can't enterprises do the same thing as us individuals? But let's go back to where we are today. And, you've been very clear for a while, there's no AI bubble. So, being over in the States these days, all I hear is this fear of the bubble bursting and what's going to happen, and doom and gloom. There's a lot of that going on. I don't get so much actually outside of the States. So why do you think the skeptics are getting it wrong?
We did a lot of work to understand what do you need to look out for to see if there's a bubble approaching. One way to think about that is a bubble bursting is a bit like a heart attack. And anyone can have a heart attack. But if somebody is morbidly obese with really high blood pressure, never exercises, and eats whipped cream they're more likely to have a heart attack than someone who doesn't have any of those attributes. In a sense, what are those biomarkers? Because you can't really predict this. Bubble bursting is really just about change in sentiment, and that could be a stampede. So the things that we looked at were these markers, and the markers were how much is being invested in the underlying assets, because bubbles always form when there's too much investment relative to the size of the economy. How much revenue is there to support the investment in those assets? How fast is revenue growing? Has the market, independently of all of that, lost its marbles, and is it valuing a company at 1 million times its earnings, a public company? And is the quality of the funding that is coming in to finance all of this high quality? Is it low quality? Is it heavily securitized and tied up in ways that you make you feel uneasy? And we quantify all of those measures. So our framework is completely ambivalent as to whether we're right about at a bubble that's going to burst, or we're in a bust cycle. It doesn't care about any of that. What it does is it measures, and it gives me a sense of what is the risk that we are near a bubble. And when we look at that data, as we did back in August last year, we looked at it again at the start of this year. We're just looking at it again now. The indicators are not red enough to say that there's going to be a sustained bubble bursting. Maybe there might be a correction, but a bubble bursting is, we remember this. This is the global financial crisis. This is the telecoms bubble, dot-com bubble of 2000, 2001. And that's not to say that this AI wave may not end up with a bubble bursting, but in my view, and more likely than not, we've still got time to run because of where the indicators currently sit. And so, why do I say that? Well, we know that there is hundreds of billions of dollars being poured into capital expenditure to buy land, power, chips, memory, cooling, and to build these huge data centers. And that's coming off the balance sheets of the biggest tech companies in the world, and increasingly there's a lot of loan financing going in there. So that can, and at the same time, that has driven up the value of certain companies. I mean, not the traditional enterprise SaaS companies, Salesforce and others are not, and SAP are not where they might otherwise be, but certainly the memory companies and the chips companies and so on. And some of these companies have gone up in value 3, 4, 5, 6 times just over the last few years. So that could be, to use an English term, bubblicious. But on the other hand, that could also be the case completely rational, because if the demand for those products from real customers paying real money is outrageous, their backlogs are going to grow, their prices are going to rise, investors are going to realize that they're sitting on top of a bottleneck, and the share prices will go up. And so that all boils down to one thing, which is, are customers, consumers or enterprises, spending money on AI? Is that legitimate dollars they're spending? Are they doing it voluntarily? Are they going to continue to do that? And the thing that you have to really watch in this market, therefore, is what is the revenue that's pouring in at the top of the funnel? And I think we've seen what's happened over the last couple of years and what's happened this year with Anthropic. The revenues are pouring in and customers are spending more and more.
Yeah. And any technology that's driven because of consumer adoption leaks into the enterprise, which is where I live, which is, and I call this the AI velocity gap, which is, as you're describing, the impact on our individual experiences in life are tremendous. How we write, how we think, how we organize, how we decorate our house, everything, right? But then you go to work on a Monday morning and you have to contend with archaic systems and SAP and things like that, right? Closing that gap is, I think, the big next thing. And it's interesting what's happening out here is you've got Dario and Altman. They're trying to sort of tone down the fear rhetoric with AI, because they've realized they are dependent on massive and global 2000 investment in their products, and enterprises are just woefully behind individuals right now in adopting AI and the way that moves. So this catch up is really starting, and I'm with you. I think we're at the beginning of a J curve, which is going to dip a little, and then it's going to have, as you say, exponential impact in the future. So
If you think about this,
yeah,
what's behind the fact that these companies have set up professional services arms? They call them forward deployed engineers,
yeah,
FDEs. They're
right,
basically systems integrators being paid
right,
much more than a traditional systems integrator. And what
yeah,
that's saying is that in order to really get a lot out of AI, you can't just slap a chatbot into the enterprise and hope that that changes things. That you really need to get into the gnarls of what it is for that company to be that company, and you need smart people who understand the AI, but also can work with the customer to make that work in a way that is deeper than how traditional systems integrators, your traditional world, has operated. And I think you can ask the question, is that a bullish statement? In other words, is that a sign the market still has further to go? Or is that a bearish statement? Is that a sign that this technology isn't working? Now, for it to be a bearish statement, a lot of things need to be true. So then it needs to be the case that companies are finding it difficult to use AI and to want to increase their spending. And the AI companies, the startups, are absolutely demanding and intent on selling to those companies who are finding it hard to use their products. And therefore, they come up with this FDE approach. And normally a startup would say, well, listen, if the customer can't use my product, maybe they're the wrong customer, we'll go somewhere else. So a lot of quite odd things need to be true. We know from Anthropic that enterprises who spent $1 with Anthropic last year are on course to spend $5 with them this year. So this does not look like rational actors across the board, the thousands of big companies who are spending money with Anthropic, doing that unless they thought they were getting something out of it. The bullish reading is that we've picked off the low-hanging fruit. What is the low-hanging fruit? It's meeting summarization. It is pulling together a quick cash flow forecast. It is helping me draft an email. It is compare two documents. It is analyze 4 vendor proposals to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of each one. That's all the trivially easy stuff that, frankly, everybody should have been doing since the middle of 2023. All of that has been picked off, and the management in those companies is starting to see the potential, which is why they are spending more and more money, 5 times more just on Anthropic.
right,
Then, in order to make that customer successful, the vendor will put smart people in. We used to call them pre-sales engineers or post-sales engineers when you and I were sort of in our 20s, right? That's what we would do. You'd sell a piece of software, it would come on a CD-ROM, and to make sure the customer bought it and paid their maintenance, you sent a sales engineer with them to make sure they did it right, and they would be paying you for years and years. This is the same process. So the bullish signal requires you to believe a lot less than the bearish signal, right? To believe the bearish signal, lots of people have to be acting irrationally or pseudo-fraudulently. To believe the bullish signal, it's like, oh yeah, they saw it, and we're just going to believe the numbers they tell us, that everyone tells us, and we've got precedent in our own very own industry that this is exactly what happens at these moments. So I do think that the way I read this is that customers are finding it hard to get the gold medal. They've got the bronze, and they've brought in a coach to help them get the gold medal because they think it's valuable to get the gold medal. And that seems fairly reasonable.
yeah, yeah. It's so much of this is people driven, which, the technology's already here and it's getting better. It's going to commoditize. The real issues with the enterprise is creating a culture where employees feel secure to experiment. They are upskilling themselves and being trained well in figuring out how to resonate with different data points, how to say, look, I need to understand our sales forecast, align them with different regions. I want to do some exploratory analysis of markets. It's starting to use the resources of your company to be smarter, slicker at how you operate. And I just think we're on a massive talent reskill. at the moment. And I love talking to the kids in college. Like my nephew's doing an MPhil in quantum at the moment, and I'm just like understanding how all the big tech firms are circling around the smart PhDs and students because they're desperate for kids who just think differently. They're thinking about how do we solve, how do we look at this company's DNA and figure out how to do things more intelligently for it. So you talk about FDEs. It's like taking an engineer in the Ferrari garage and putting him in the car itself and saying, go run a couple of laps and really experience what you're building. Do you know what I mean? It's doing and experiencing rather than just saying, come up with a nice strategy on a PowerPoint.
It is that. I think the fact that the hiring standard bar is so high tells us quite a lot about the complexity of what we're dealing with. I think it's very hard for companies to really get to grips in any meaningful way with AI. We just published this essay recently about why AI isn't showing on the bottom line right now in more than most companies. There's a really trivial answer, which I think is the sort of most historically accurate answer, which is it's a J curve as he's described. We should be in the bottom of the J if this is a great technology. If it's a really easy to use technology like a photocopier where not much changed in the business, we should be out of the J. It's a really important technology. We're deep in the J. But the harder question is, how do you even navigate your way through that? And what we discovered within my team, small team, but I think it's similar to what else is happening, is that individual productivity creates superpowers in individuals, and they produce more and more material, and they create congestion, more PRs to review, more contracts for legal approval, and those processes and the people in those processes need to be able to deal at that pace. And so you have to start to solve this problem as you go through a company. Even if you get over cultural resistance, if people are just not used to working in this way, as soon as some teams or people in teams do, you will get this mismatch, this impedance mismatch. We've seen it within our teams as well, and the company is small. And then you get to the thing that you described, which was like, I would want to go off and do a market analysis. Well, the assumption in most companies is that the people who can do market analyses are few and far between. And no one else has the tools and the resources to go off and do it. Well, now, with ChatGPT subscription, you can go off and do that. But the company hasn't been organized in such a way that it can deal with 30% of the employees doing market analysis and expect to treat them sensibly or with any degree of respect. So these are some of the really, really hard challenges. And I'm not sure, by the way, that FDEs, for deployed engineers, address that type of question, because it goes into the heart of what a company is.
Yeah, it's how can you scale ordinary and not just extraordinary, right, with people? Because, you can go out and hire a crack group of PhDs or master students, but then what about your regular people who are getting smarter and slicker using this stuff as well? So I think the FDE is a good starting point, but it really was something that I think was invented by, oddly enough, SAP in about 2010, where it was a model for how can we get more with smaller numbers of people to deploy software. So I think it's a good concept, but it's something that needs to be watered down, scaled by companies, and just this new way of working needs to become recognized. So
can I just? I'm going to challenge you now on something, right. Phil. We're going to flip our. So let's play this game. You spend a lot of time with enterprises, and I think that's why you sort of kind of cut through the noise so well. If an organization's people are going to get smarter and slicker, right. What's going to happen? So you're in a market that's a competitive market. You've got 3 or 4 major competitors. you get smarter and slicker, but you're paying for AI. So you've got higher costs, and out of your smartness and slickness, you are now winning a little bit more business, which is great. So your CFO is happy. Your three competitors are now losing market share, and their profitability has come down. And they look at you and they go, "Oh yeah, Phil got Copilot or Claude Code. Let's get Copilot and Claude Code because anyone else can get there." And that advantage you have is going to get competed away. And the margin expansion that you enjoyed is going to get competed away. And within a couple of years, you and your three competitors are full of smart and slick people. We'll now be the smartest and the slickest of everyone. Or what's that film with Jim Carrey, Slicker and Slickerer, Dumb and Dumber, right? Slicker, Dumb and Dumber, Slicker and Slick and Smart. Everyone is slick and smart. So that market share that you gained, you've given up. The margin pricing power you've given up, but you're now paying a fee for AI within there. And so, in fact, your costs have gone up and you're standing in the same place and you enjoyed a short 2 or 3 year temporary advantage, which if you're the CEO of this company, it's public, that is absolutely the moment to leave when you're at a high.
Right.
But so why isn't that what happens at this point?
It's a very good question. And a lot of it's around competitive edge. What is it that is giving you the edge in the market? Okay, you got an edge because you got to be able to do things quicker and sharper. So I bought a car insurance policy from a well-known brand a couple of years ago, and another well-known brand literally came along and offered me the same policy at half the price. And I actually knew the CIO of that company, and they've just been doing some really cool investments in AI to allow them just to run insurance operations a lot cheaper than the others. So eventually the other guy will probably catch up and they'll come back to me next year and say, "Look, Phil, we want you back as a customer. We can match their price." And then it's down to, I think, things like experience, how you work with clients. I think the human element is going to become more and more important. I really believe that. There's a very good article from Ethan Mollick, I don't know if you read it this week, about being human. It was good coming from him. But the ability to create client relationships, give them an experience, create stickiness in your business, whether you're selling research or credit cards or mobile phones, whatever industry you're in. I think we get down to different ways of working with people who want to deal with you in a certain way. I also think the nature of companies is changing dramatically, and we'll see a lot more small to medium businesses in the next 2 or 3 years springing up than ever, because companies don't need to be as big. The Global 2000 is really struggling because most of these companies are just too big. There's too much legacy. They're struggling with change. And on top of that, if you're working for a great big bank or something, why should you change? I mean, you're just picking up a salary and doing your job, and you think, so I do think if you're coming out of college in the next couple of years, you're going to get job offers from a lot of small companies who are looking to run marketing with 2 people, run sales with 3 people, run finance with 2 people and good software. So I think we're going to see a whole change in makeup of businesses, size of companies, ways of operating. Is it going to create more jobs in time? Hopefully. It's difficult to say. But jobs go where the demand is. Like, we have a massive shortage of people in healthcare, huge shortage of plumbers, electricians, all these sorts of things as well. So, I'm not so glum about the future. I do worry about companies that are too big. Right.
I'm gonna. This is mean that I've turned the tables this way, but I'm going to do it. Right. So, what you smuggled in there, though, was you smuggled in with your insurance example the fact that somebody could sell the insurance at half the price, which means their cost base has to be fundamentally different. And in a business like insurance, a lot of that cost base is in headcount as people.
Yeah.
And so that sits uneasily with where we started, which was enterprises retraining people. Because you are, training is expensive, and if your cost base is coming down and you're going to bring down your number of people, it's not clear that you need to you should be training those people. Like, as a fiduciary duty of the board will say to you, wait, you trained all these people and you had no intention of maintaining their employment. That's inappropriate, right? Unless it's part of the the transition package that you're giving them. So what's very complex here, I think, is that there is going to be some kind of a reconfiguration of companies. And I don't even think it is about a question of cost. Cost is going to be there. There is going to be a correlative impact there between kind of cost savings and people. But it's just that the nature of the work that you need to get done is going to change. In a world with where factories were powered by steam, there was a guy whose job it was to fill the coal boiler with coal. How many people in that job does HFS employ, Phil? You can be honest here and you can admit that number to me. Right? Zero. I hope. Zero, yeah. Right? And we don't not employ coal people, fillers, for cost. We don't employ them because it's not appropriate to hire people in roles that don't exist anymore. And I think one of the really hard things that we're going to have to contend with is that it becomes really, really clear that the reconfiguration of companies is going to take place because this technology moves information around in a different way. It allows decisions to be made at different points. And as you rightly identified, Global 2000 has got very, very big. And this is the bit that I find I'm glad I'm not a public company CEO, because how do I square all of these different signals? I mean, many of which you've said, Global 2000 are too big, you got to compete with innovation, ... right? I mean, this is a really, really knotty problem that they face.
Oh, it is, and I had 4 CEOs on stage at our summit last week. I'm not going to name names, and one of them said to me behind the scenes, if anyone is kidding themselves that we aren't going to shrink, they're kidding themselves, right? A lot of these big firms are going to get smaller. It's just a changing nature of delivering services, such as IT right. services business. It's just a changing nature. You're just not going to need that many people. You don't need as many coders. You don't need as many people to answer customer calls, right? So some firms are going to shed. They might shed 20, 30% of their staff, maybe even more, some of them. But some of these firms will diversify into areas where there is new demand, where it could be supporting companies with their marketing or with their supply chain or with other areas. So the smart businesses are going to be gravitating towards areas where they can keep growing. And the new statistic we need to look at is, how is growth tied to job creation? Right now, job creation on Wall Street is a dirty word, right? You talk to a CEO of every services firm right now, they are so depressed because every Wall Street analyst hates any company that needs to add people to make money. And when Jeff Bezos came out and said, I'm going to double Amazon's revenue in 5 years without hiring any more headcount, his stock went up, right? That's the goal of the company, is how do we grow without adding people? Now, the next problem is going to be only 6% of Global 2000 companies have done anything remotely mature with AI. We've got the data to prove it. 9 out of 10 companies are just in pilot mode. It's a lot of lip service. They haven't figured this out yet. You've got this massive pressure point developing where these enterprises need to close the gap. And you've got our lovely friends on the frontier models who are going to get frustrated because they want Global 2000 firms to keep spending more and more with them. So what's going to start to happen is this realization that to transform an enterprise from a 2015 mindset to a 2027 mindset is going to require talent and people and skills. And there has to be an evolution of who's actually getting the talent, creating the talent, developing the culture. They're going to be the successful firms. Now, I think it's a responsibility of government as well to incentivize enterprises to train their people, to incentivize academia, to make sure their graduates are coming out with the right skills so they can be easily trained and developed. And then I think big companies in services or consulting or these other white collar jobs, they're going to take on graduates and maybe incubate them for 2-3 years. And don't build them out, just have them learn, have them develop. And then, I just think this whole rethink around talent is what's just starting right now. And it's going to be painful, but it's going to become political. And but the bottom line is the world's moving in this direction. There is no stopping this at this point. And there has to be a smarter way of aligning where we're going with directions and decisions and policies. So on that note, you came back from China recently, Azeem. Do you want to tell me a bit about what your experience was there and how you compare it to everywhere else?
Yeah, I've been to China twice in the last 9 months now, I reckon. And this last trip was fascinating. We were with a group of other writers and analysts, specializing either in questions of AI or in China, or in some cases the intersection. And we had over a week where we met people from 14 AI labs and robotics companies. So, colleagues met with colleagues, Alibaba and Minimax, ByteDance, DeepSeek, Unitree, the whole caboodle. Had long conversations, often dinners and lunches with them. One case, we went out for karaoke and they left us at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning to go back to the office to check how our training run had been going. It was a really, really remarkable and very open conversation. And what I would reflect on is that I think we know the story that Chinese are short of compute across their AI industry because of various export controls, and they have really emphasized the open source approach for development, which has been a key part actually of China's software industry for decades. But the thing that I took away, and I wrote this in an essay, is that the industry within China is developing a really deep capacity for being lean. They don't have the compute, which is the thing that you really, really need. And they don't have the compute. They have about 1/7, 1/8 of the compute the Americans have, and the American labs have. So it's really, really, they're quite far behind. And you've got to think about how that would otherwise slow you down, because you can't essentially run a big training run and serve all your customers by inference all at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. And so they've established a discipline of developing models that are only 6 months behind the US models, although they're 2 to 3 years behind on the amount of compute they've got. And I think that is creating a moat that I call the efficiency moat, something that is going to be persistently an advantage even as the compute availability opens up, which inevitably, as with all shortages, it will over the next 2 or 3 years. And that, I think, is a really, really fascinating thing to look at. I thought back to the best parallel I could think of was in the automobile industry. So back in the 1950s and 60s, the Japanese moved from light machinery and motorbikes into cars, companies like Honda and Toyota, and they didn't have access to cheap energy or cheap steel. They're still building their industrial base. Japan doesn't have many sort of indigenous energy sources, and they had very expensive access to capital. And in order to compete, they built cars through a process of persistently improving their efficiency. It got called Kaizen, it got called the Toyota production system, and it became a source of persistent advantage. So when in the 1980s, the US started to, consumers wanted to buy more efficient cars, Detroit couldn't compete on a cost basis with the Japanese. Back then it was Honda, Datsun, and of course Toyota. And that is a really important parallel to what I think is happening within China, which is right now, the American labs have got unlimited compute, although they actually don't have unlimited compute. They still feel very constrained, and they've got these kind of hyper muscular models. They're like a British bulldog that's been fed steroids, like a massive barrel chest, and they can do anything. But there'll come a point where enterprises won't need an AI model that's smarter than 40 Nobel laureates to determine whether a ticket needs to go to customer services or whether it needs to go to data protection, right? You'll be able to do that triage with a really dumb, cheap, small model. So my sense is that the fact that the Chinese ecosystem has developed and is developing in a very different way with different attributes, even though there are commonalities, is actually going to be really beneficial for enterprises all around the world, because it is avoiding us having this sort of monoculture where everything looks the same.
Right. And how would you assess, based on your at least couple of last visits, is there a different mindset approach to this that you're seeing elsewhere?
I think the only places with really distinct approaches are the US and China, and to some extent the UAE, which is a much smaller business. But there are things that are complicated in China, and particularly think about the enterprise. So Chinese enterprises at all sorts of levels don't really like paying for software. And they don't pay for software because it's like you've written it for me. You're not doing any more work. Why should I be paying for it? And so they tend to work on project basis. So we know that there is a diffusion story in China, both within consumers but also within businesses. And I saw some absolutely superb examples of that. One was, I think you might appreciate this, is a brewery that was a self-optimizing, like agentic brewery with this closed loop autonomous system being run by the kind of agents you and I might be playing around with. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily OpenClaw, but it was basically an agent harness strapped over an open source AI model. And this brewery had been running for a while, and it was very impressive. And but here are the things you have to think about, which is that in that industry, in that country rather, they don't have a culture for paying for something like that on a retained basis, on a monthly basis. They will pay on a project basis than on a fix this bug type of basis. So that I think paints a picture of the kind of complexity and how different it is to the US market.
So getting back to how we really look at this in the enterprise, and I think this is a good comparison between China and US, is trusting AI agents to make real decisions, not just, you said draft emails and things. I think that's one of the biggest issues holding back, big global corporations right now. What do you think needs to happen to engender more trust from business leaders to put more confidence in these technologies?
The fact that they are so-called unreliable technologies, which hallucinate or confabulate, and we have all had experiences of those. The more you use AI, the way I use it, hundreds of millions of tokens a day, I'm dealing with these things all the time, and I figured out how to build verification loops and so on. That I think is used as an excuse for not really going for it. Just let's play a hypothetical experiment. Imagine you could have a model as powerful as Claude Opus 4.7, which is seen as the most powerful model. That was 100% reliable, that wasn't sycophantic, that didn't lose track of what it was trying to do, that didn't try to over second guess you, but was just brilliant and 100% reliable. Do we really think that the CEOs of Global 2000s, who by and large have not spent tens or hundreds of hours themselves using this technology to really have the holy shit moment that you need to have, do we really think that they would be moving faster? And I don't think they would be moving faster, because all of the things that we have discussed so far, which are about the people and how do you retrain people and what happens to the shape of the company, what is the business that we are actually in, these are not to do with the quality of the models. At no point did we say, and this is happening because GPT 4.5 hallucinates. We never talked about it. It was about the technology at the state that it was in. And so the barrier in the enterprise, especially at the leadership level, is is not to do with the maturity or not of the technology. It's absolutely 100% everything to do with the fact that if it's not a general purpose technology, if it's like a photocopy or a coffee machine, the CEO doesn't need to know about it. Why would they? If it is a general purpose technology, then these are epochally complicated things to deal with, and they take time for the norms and the standard operating procedures and the belief to emerge in an economy to act on them. And the reason that I think it's the second and not the first is because I happen to think, for very reasoned reasons, that AI is a general purpose technology. I also happen to think it doesn't really matter whether it isn't as good today as it will be in 5 years' time, because frankly, the first cars made by Mr. Benz, the first engines were not as good as the engines we have today, and that didn't stop us buying them and using them 100 years ago. It is absolutely down to have the senior execs contended with the fact that for the first time in 100 years, there's a general purpose technology as disorienting as this. And I don't really think they have, because this is not something you can be taught about in a briefing. This is something you actually have to do. And you for all the things that I do, I make big kind of allocation decisions. I make important decisions that are important to me, but in the external world would be seen as decisions of a certain scale. And I got my hands dirty because I knew it was important. And the only way you can actually understand it is if you've gone out and built these things and built with them and really, really started to play about. That's the only way now. In 2 or 3 years' time, there will be more case studies coming out of business schools, and there'll be, more books of experience. And then I think you will start to see companies leaning into it. But I absolutely don't think it's about model quality right now. And I think it's absolutely to do with the fact that the Global 2000 companies have enough momentum, that there's enough inertia and an uphill struggle that faces any real disruptor to them, that CEO tenure is not sufficiently long for them to care. I think if you went off and said to the CEOs of the Global 2000 companies, we are putting all of your compensation in a clawback on the basis that if this company is disrupted by AI in the next 10 years, we're going to come after you and get it all back, I promise you they'll be moving quicker than they are now.
Yeah. I think that's a very good suggestion. You think about it, employment traditionally was workers who usually maybe needed to retool once in their career. Now we're having to retool, 2-3 times? So it's this gap between how fast the technology moves and how slowly institutions can respond. And you're exactly right. If you are very entrenched in the technologies yourselves, you just know when you talk to people whether they are or not, or whether it feels like a conversation we had 10 years ago where you could tell a senior exec was bullshitting. You know what I mean? You could bullshit your way around a lot of this stuff, but I think we're at the point where we did our summit last week in the US, and it's a great litmus test for where we are. You could just feel the fear in the room for 2 days.
Oh, could you?
You could really feel it. Like it's an anxiety. It's almost, you can tell some people have really embraced it and they're very excitable about it. And they're smart as well. Everyone's paranoid because you can think, how useful am I going to be in 2 or 3 years' time? And then you've got people over 50 who might be just thinking, look, all I have to do is ride this out for a couple more years and I'll just retire or something.
And I know I look very young, Phil, but I'm well into my 50s. There is a lot going on, right? There is so much news. It is exhausting. There is so many changes to models and harnesses and this and that. It is very, very tiring, even if it's, you've made it your job, as I have, to look into it. And there are moments where you just think, God, I wish this would all slow down. I think what you have to do is you have to adjust your expectations about this. And we all have responsibilities to, even beyond our work, right? To family, to children, to be given the beneficial positions that we hold in the world at large, to get a sense of really, really understanding what is going on and what's possible, and why and how. I think it was always going to be difficult for big companies, for us to make sense of a general purpose technology, because it's happening to us. We tend to sort of single AI out for particular qualities that it has, but I really don't think it's about that. I really do think it is about the fact that, a simple question would be, if everybody is more productive, then no one's productive. So we've run to standstill. And is that really the end state of using AI for a company, which is to increase productivity? I wrote this essay about the final stage of what an AI company looks like, and it's the hardest one to reach, and we don't really find many companies, if any, who have got there, which is actually about this one metric. So a company has a cycle time. They actually have multiple cycle times, which is the cycle time is essentially how long does it take them to observe a change in the external environment, in the market, in their customers, in the technology landscape. How long does it then take them to orient themselves towards that change, make a decision about it, and act on it, and then go through that loop again. And companies in your arena, cloud starts to show up in 2005, 2006. Ignoring the legacy issues, it took some companies a decade to notice it and decide to act on it. So their cycle time is like 25 years. And my intuition is that the cycle time in the world of AI is going to be the thing that AI native companies are going to be exceptional at. And fundamentally not having that static, having it dynamic. In other words, getting it shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's how you construct persistent advantage. In the previous example, where we talked about everyone being slicker and slickerer, your advantage gets competed away because your competitor gets it, and now you're all competing, same margin, higher costs because you're all paying for AI. The way in which you turn that into something that you can compete with is the tightening of your response and learning loop as a company, the cycle time of your company. And if you get good at that, and AI will help you do that, you will constantly be able to basically be, as fighter pilots say, inside the energy envelope of your opponent, and therefore win the market.
Absolutely. And honestly, the whole makeup of work is changing. And so I run an analyst company, and my biggest issue right now is a lot of my analysts have got really, really good because they're all using these tools. And I need to make sure they're collaborating with each other more than they are with their LLMs. And it's an issue. And me, myself, personally, I've cut back on the amount of meetings I take because I want more time to work. I'm like a analyst on steroids these days. It's a lot of fun. I'm way more productive. I can get a lot more done. I can expand what I cover. It's the only thing I said to my wife this morning. I said, I'm a bit worried I'm getting ADD. She said, me too. But it's true. I think it's like there's so much going on. I don't know about you, but the workplace has become so manic, so chaotic. There's so much stuff flying at you. There's so many tools open for communication and stuff that learning how to manage and cope with these things is becoming more and more important. And I find I'm spending more and more time trying to just get good time with my clients and my staff, because that human interaction is now more valuable than ever. It's like people are lonely, people are stressed, people are having more, I hate to say it, mental health issues because the nature of work has become very intense. That as a leader and a coach, you've got to change your own style and adapt as well. So, this is like a voyage of change. I love what you're saying about this time to retool, but I think this is much more personal than any technology revolution we've been through, probably since the Industrial Revolution. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that idea that it's important and it's uncomfortable and you need time with your people is a really powerful one. We're a very small team, and but we have changed. The way people work has changed over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, they do have more time. They have more time away from their computers, more time working by hand. And why is that? It's because you can do higher quality work, and the AIs can take that higher quality work and turn it into the document or the pseudo finished product for you to come back and polish. I spend much more time now writing longhand with a pen than I have since 1989. So I think the Berlin Wall was still up when I last used a pen as much as this, and maybe, I don't know, can't remember what was happening in pop music back then. So that has been one of the ways that I have been able to kind of get more out of the use of AI tools. And we of course have got all of these things running. We've built our own reasoning architecture, by which I mean, lots of knowledge comes into the company in different ways that we through our data products and research we read and write. We then have internal tooling so that if you want to reason through a particular class of question, you can just fire that off. So for example, if you want to see how well a group of customers might respond to a new piece of research, you can take that piece of research, you can spin up a simulation of 50 customer personas based on kind of real customer interactions, and you can watch them argue over the piece of research or these agents that represent them, and go back and look at what they clung to or didn't cling to, decide yourself as a human what's important for me to change or what is working really, really well. So we have all of these types of tools available for the team, and there are sort of other things in there as well, and that's all good and well. And I think you could probably run a business like ours without anyone, frankly. I mean, we could all go down to the beach, except that our business isn't a ninth decile business. We're a 10th decile business. And so being in the top 1% of what we do, feeling that we've been at the top 1% isn't sufficient, let alone top 10%. And that requires us. And so we will never eliminate the bottleneck problem, because the fact that I'm typing the words in by hand, or the fact that I hand wrote them with a fountain pen and dictated them into voice to text, is a really, really important part of our process, of our product, and most importantly, of our promise.
That's right. Having that authentic voice has never been more important in my view. Well, in that regard, I'd like to thank you for a wonderful hour. I really enjoyed this conversation. We never had to stick to the script, and it was great to hear how you're doing, and I hope to see you soon. We're doing our London Summit coming up in a few months, so I'm going to see if we can get you along for that, and you can see how our world has changed a bit. So.
No, that's fantastic, Phil. It's great to talk to you. Thank you.
It's terrific. Love the time, and to the next time. And I look forward to airing this podcast with everyone. It's going to get some good feedback, I think.